Hey, what's up, everybody? And thank you for listening to Operation Agency Freedom, where we are bringing you top secret advice from the world's most badass digital agency owners. These amazing men and women are sharing their stories of how they have built 6, 7, and 8-figure digital agencies and how you can too. My name is Chris Martinez. I am the CEO of Dude, where we help digital agencies by giving them the people and the processes so they can take on more projects and scale profitably. Today, I am joined by Mike King, the founder and managing director at iPullRank. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey Chris, thanks for having me. I didn't know you were gonna come with full radio voice. This is
I
amazing.
know. See, I freak people out because, like, behind the scenes, I'm just like, okay, we're going to do this. And I'm just like, but then once the light goes on, I'm just like, we got to bring the fire, man. So,
No, I feel you. I feel
very
you.
excited to have you on the show. We start off with the roundtable discussion, and I'm very excited to talk about this because a lot of people don't know this, but I really like gangster rap. I grew up on gangster rap, and I
Mhm.
wanted to. I was a little want to be gangbanger when I was growing up, and so you are a rapper. So
That's
I want
true.
to hear all about the story and how you got involved in rap, and like when's the last time that you were on stage and all that good stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. I started rhyming when I was 14, and after college, or really during college, that was what I really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had started collecting a lot of like independent hip hop, and of course a lot of stuff you're talking about. Like I was really into like Wu-Tang and things
Mm-hmm.
like that growing up. Had a ton of vinyl and all this stuff, and so that was what I wanted to be. I wanted to make music, and I wanted to. My original goal was just to sell like 50,000 copies of a record and be able to sell out a show
Mm-hmm.
anywhere in America. And so after school I started putting out vinyl. I started touring.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing a lot of MC battling. So before it became
Nice.
like these written things where everyone like is basically a pen pal with someone else and doing it
Yeah.
on YouTube. It was a lot more like how 8 Mile was, where it's like, all right, you got to have the best freestyle, and anything could happen from one of those battles. So I definitely was approached a couple times about signing to a major label because I'd won some of these battles. Um, but for whatever reason, like I was never actually interested in signing to a major label.
Mm-hmm.
And I did sign to a couple small independent labels, one of which was distributed by Sony. And so, I have a few records that came out and things like that. I toured all over the States. I toured all over Europe, played in Australia. I played in Africa. And
Wow.
yeah, it was my life for 8 years.
That's
Um,
crazy. What year did I guess what year were you in college when it really started to take shape and you were like, this is what I want to do? What were those
yeah, I mean,
forming years?
so I went to college starting in '99, and
Okay. So you're about the same age as
from
me.
yeah, so like around that time because when you're in school, like you're exposed to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. Like
Absolutely.
all these independent rappers, all these like up and coming major label rappers are performing at your school. So there was a time where like I opened for Jay-Z at school, and
Oh my
I was doing
gosh.
all these types of things, and I was burning CDs that I made and selling them on campus and all this. So
Yep.
like it was more that like I was a rapper going to school rather than a student who rapped. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And like I was also an honor student, and then I was just like, you know what? I can go to school until I'm, however old. I can probably only rap till I'm 30. And so I was like, I'm gonna do that instead. And that's what I did. And so, yeah, like 8 years of touring and putting out records, and not really getting the level of success that I had imagined.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but doing a lot of things that are like cool stories to tell people. Like I said, I was really into Wu-Tang growing up. And in
Yeah.
2005, I toured with like three people from Wu-Tang.
Wow.
So yeah, like I have a lot of great memories of being in a van with like Capadonna and You God and Inspector Deck and all these people, and like, trying to be cool about it while I'm sitting next to people I grew up listening to.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a great experience. And to like kind of speak to the marketing side of it, it's what prepared me to do this. Like I didn't go to
Yep.
school for marketing. I went to school for computer science. And like I've never taken a marketing class in my life, but you know, being able to sell CDs on the street to people who don't know you
Right.
when Napster exists, like that is a skill set,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
it's really what taught me how to be a marketer.
Yeah, absolutely. So hip hop and rap has evolved into the mainstream, and
Mm-hmm.
like when it first came out, I'm sure you remember, like it was not on MTV back when
No,
MTV
it
actually
wasn't.
played music. It would be
Right.
on the late night with Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Dre and Ed
Ed
Lover, and
Lover,
they
yep.
had Yo MTV Raps. It was like from 11 p.m. to like midnight, and that's the only time that they would play rap music. And it's just
Yo.
amazing for me to see how much hip hop has become a part of the mainstream culture. Like
Mm-hmm.
Gary V for example, like he's all about hip hop. And
Yeah.
like he tries to play it up like he's gangster, but dude, he's not. Like we know that he's not. But that's just, I mean, that's he embraces the culture.
Yep.
So it like when you decided that you wanted to be a rapper, like I know you said that Wu-Tang was one of your big influences. What grabbed you about that style of music?
Yeah. I mean, so specifically it was Method Man that made me want to
Mm-hmm.
rap. And you know, to this day, when I rap, like in my head, my voice sounds like his voice, even though it clearly does not. Um, and you know, it was just this thing that like the music just really resonated with me. Like if you think about that time period, like 1995 through 97, even up
Mm-hmm.
to 99, hip hop was largely driven by like this East Coast mid-Atlantic sound, like very much New York, very much Philly, and so on. And the other part of my story is that I very much have like a Fresh Prince story. Like my parents, I grew up in Philly. My
Yep.
parents thought I was going to get into too much trouble. And so they moved me out of Philly to Connecticut to go to school.
Yeah, auntie and uncle.
And no, but with my parents.
Yeah.
Um, and so you know, hip hop was a way for me to still feel connected to like my inner city upbringing. So like I
Yeah.
was doing everything. I was breakdancing, I was DJing, I was doing graffiti, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately rapping was what I thought I could be the best at, and so that's what I stuck with. um
That's interesting. You
yeah,
know,
so the real quick funny story. Ed Lover, because you mentioned him,
yeah.
I went to a Criss Cross concert in
Oh
92,
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and it
I
was
love it.
Criss Cross and the Far Side. The Far Side opened for
Oh,
them,
dude, I love
and
Farside's still one of my favorite. Well, I can't remember the
yeah,
names. I can hear the
can't
song in
keep
my
it
head.
away.
Yes,
Yeah,
still one of my
yeah,
favorite rap songs.
yeah. So anyway, so Ed Lover was the host of the concert, and I've never told this story. It's so embarrassing. And he has like this little contest before the show starts,
Uh-huh.
or maybe it was between the Far Side and Criss Cross. And I was one of those kids that got picked for everything growing up. Like I would go to like, you know, Universal Studios and they would pick me to, you know, be on Double Dare and things like that, right? And anyway, so he's like, yeah, who wants to come up and do something like a little talent show? And of course I get picked, but this is before I could rap, before I could freestyle or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. And like first this woman goes and she like dances and everybody's like, oh, cool, whatever. Then it's my turn and I try to freestyle and I can't. So I'm just like stammering my words and I get booed off the stage.
No way.
Yeah. And again, this is like 92. So I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, 11.
11 years old,
I'm
12 years old. Yeah.
completely devastated by this. But yeah, then I ultimately became a fantastic freestyler. So
Dude, that's awesome. I mean, that's a great like root story that shows you like how you literally got booed off stage,
yeah.
and then eventually you're touring around with your idols, Wu-Tang. So,
Yeah.
cool,
Crazy.
man. I love that. Well, let's talk about iPullRank. So why
Mhm.
don't you just really quickly just give us like your elevator pitch or your value proposition. What do you guys do at iPullRank?
Sure. We're a digital marketing agency. We primarily focus on SEO and content strategy. One of the things that we do that most people don't is like an audience driven search. So in this space, I was one of the people that like made it popular to use market segmentation on the persona level to inform your SEO.
Okay.
And it makes our work very impactful, very effective. We also do what we call technical content optimization, which is basically content engineering. So nobody knows how Google's algorithms work
Right.
completely, but we do know that content creates like a statistical expectation within search engines based on what ranks. And so we can use natural language processing to understand that and then engineer content that meets those expectations. So the things that we make tend to rank very quickly. And then the other thing is that we're incredibly results driven. So, our organization doesn't bill hourly. We're based on deliverables. And the reason why is because one, billing hourly is annoying because then we got to track all our hours.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it doesn't work for the client either because we have to just continue to show activity so they keep paying us every month rather than focusing in on the results. And so because we're like, all right, here's a series of deliverables that need to be done to solve your problem, the entire focus is on results rather than like, can you keep paying us? So those are our three things that I think make us different and very effective.
Nice, man. Definitely a unique approach. And like I ran an agency for a number of years. I actually never sold SEO because it was just so far out of the scope of what I knew. So how did you get into the SEO game?
Yeah, so that's another whole story too. So it was literally an accident. So 2006, I'm in the middle of like being a rapper and don't have health insurance because there's no Obamacare back then. And so I got into this bicycle accident and I needed to, get a job to pay my medical bills.
Yep.
And the first place to hire me was an SEO agency because of my development background.
Because you had the background in computer science?
Right, exactly. And so they're like, all right, well, you know how to build websites. I'm sure you can figure this out. And at that point, SEO was really, really simple, right? Like it was like, okay, you bold keywords on pages and you type in queries like add URL plus your keyword, and then you drop in links that way. And you make sure that the site like can be crawled and whatever. And that's pretty much it, right? So yes, I did figure it out very quickly. And I enjoyed my job, and this was also when I was introduced to this concept of working from home, because that accident happened in August. I got the job in August. No, the accident happened in July. I got the job in August, and I was supposed to go on my first European tour in November. So I was like, all right, I'll just keep this job long enough to like pay these bills and go on tour, and life will go on, right? And when I was about to give my notice, my boss at the time, who was also a musician, was like, "Oh no, you don't have to quit. You can work from home." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, just take your computer on the road and keep working." And so that's what I did. And I'm in Europe, like on trains, like because back then for SEO they just gave us the website and it's like, "All right, fix it." It wasn't like
There's no strategy or anything.
Yeah, there's no like making deliverables and documents and being like, okay, here's how we're gonna do it. It's just like, here, fix it. And so that's what I was doing. And and that was going really well until, I think the company just wasn't doing well. And so me and the owner weren't really getting along. And so I just quit. And that kept happening for a few jobs. Like I would stay at a job till my boss would piss me off, and then I go back on the road. And then I got a job at a multinational agency called Razorfish, and I loved it. It was great. I'm working with like really smart people, working on big brands, and getting these fantastic results. And I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. And two things happened there. One, they had just hired me as a contractor rather than a full-time employee. And I really wanted to work there full-time, but at the time they didn't really have the headcount. And so I was just working my ass off. Like I was building software, I was staying late. Like despite the fact that my allocation was only 24 hours, I was definitely working at least 40 or 50 hours, like trying to show them like, yo, I want this job. I'm killing it. But I don't think they. So when I interviewed, because my experience was just doing things and not writing about things, they were like, "Oh, you're junior. You don't understand how this is done."
Interesting.
And ultimately, I I I knew more about what we did than most of the people that were full time on the job. And that's not to say that, like I said, those people were great. I worked with some really talented folks, and I learned a lot from them. But the way that was positioned was like, oh, you're junior because you've never written a site audit, despite the fact that you have fixed websites and gotten rankings before. And so after all of that happened, I was like, all right, well, they keep extending my contract. I'm not a full-time employee. So I'm going to go to another publicist agency like the agency network that Razorfish is in and get a job offer, bring it back, and then Razorfish will have to hire me. And so I did that, and they still couldn't hire me because they didn't have the headcount. And so I moved to New York and started working at Publicis Modem, which is a sister agency. And I ran SEO there. Like I was like smallest fish at Razorfish, but I didn't even mean for the fish thing to happen. And then at Modem, like I am the only SEO person. So that was cool because I got to decide or define a offering because there was nothing before me, right? And but also working at an ad agency, being an SEO, no one gives a shit about what you do. And so as a result of that, I also started getting involved in thought leadership in the SEO space. And my life at work was not like my life in the industry. So within this industry, I'm doing all this stuff, and people are being like, wow, this kid's a whiz kid. We want to do the things he's doing. But at work, I'm not even knowing that we've got projects going out until the day before. And they're like, yo, Mike, can you press the SEO button? And I'm like, yo, that's not how any of this works. So, so another thing that happened at Razorfish, or while I was at Razorfish, I did a few shows in Europe with my friend at the time, and we're on a train, and he's like, "Oh, Mike, I know you're doing this SEO thing. My cousin owns an SEO software company," and I'm like, "Who's your cousin?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, his name is Rand Fishkin," and I'm like, "What?" And Rand Fishkin is like one of the biggest names in our space.
Mm-hmm.
So, I ended up reaching out to Rand and like connecting with him. And then once I moved to New York, I ended up meeting him in person.
Mm-hmm.
And as my thought leadership had increased and so on, we just like really started to connect. And it just came at the same time of me like starting to speak at all these things and it just really didn't make sense for me to continue to work at the place that I worked at.
Yeah.
So long story short, I left there, got a better job with more power, and then worked at a couple more agencies. And then after all that experience, I was like, I'm pretty sure I can do a better job myself. And here we are 6 years later. Turns out that I might be right.
Nice. So, that jump from employee to business owner, pretty much everybody has been there. I know that I've been there before. What have been some of the biggest learning lessons that you've gained over the 6 years since you've been running the agency, and now you're the boss? Like the buck stops with you.
There's so many lessons.
I know. I know this is a loaded question.
Yeah, I would say two main things for me specifically. One, you can't build the place where you want it to work, because that doesn't necessarily attract or align with the people that work there. And what I mean by that is like, all right, if I built the company that I wanted to work at, you're going to attract a lot of people who are like you that are going to, want to go start their own businesses, and they're not going to want to stay with you no matter what you do. Like you can't satisfy a person like that. And the other thing is that process is everything. I am not a inherently process oriented person. If you were to give me the same task like 5 times, I would do it 5 different ways because I'm always looking for a better way to do it. right? That doesn't necessarily work for the average person. The average person needs a very clear set of instructions. And once they get comfortable with those instructions, then they'll look to iterate in small pockets here and there. But that's not going to be for a few months of them like doing the same thing over and over. And, an entrepreneur doesn't necessarily need that level of prescription for what they are doing. Again, they're going to look for creative ways to solve the problem. And because I'm so not that way, and I would expect that other people were the way that I am, it definitely caused us not to like um get things right at first, right? Like I went through a lot of employees before I realized like, wait, okay, the problem here is that my expectations don't align with how most people are. And so I've got to build something that most people can come in and contribute to.
Absolutely.
So yeah, those are my two main things.
Yeah, you know what? I see that same problem with a lot of like, because our agencies that we work with, they're doing websites, they're doing, landing pages, design. And specifically with the web dev agencies, the owner is usually pretty savvy and they're great at building out a system. But the problem with that system is that there is like one person out of, 500 million that fit that role. So you end up having to re-engineer the whole system so that you can put your average person in there. And I recently heard somebody say that like a great system is where you can drop anybody in there and they can make it work. So that's definitely a huge lesson that we've learned as well, and that we help our agencies to understand too.
Yeah.
So on a getting back to something that you said at the very beginning about how you guys operate, and I can't remember, it sounded like it was kind of like performance based. Or results
it's not
based.
Performance based. It's not
deliverable based.
Yeah, it's deliverable based, and that's an important distinction to make, because when I say we're results focused, people automatically think we're a performance agency, where it's like, all right, you don't pay until you get X number of leads or whatever. So what I mean by that is that whenever we do an engagement, as part of our proposal process, we do a deep dive into the site and the goals for our clients. And we say, okay, based on these are the 10 items that we need to create for you to execute against in order to get that result. And so the pricing is based on that. So let's say, just, as an example, you need us to do 10 things, and each of those things is 10 grand. Well, then your scope is 100K, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no surprises unless we all agree like, hey, you need to do more of something or whatever. But even then, you'd have to agree to it. Whereas a lot of, or most other agencies are like, okay, cool, you're going to sign with us. We're going to scope your project with 10 people, and, their blended rate is $150 or whatever. And we're giving you an allocation of, 100 hours a month or something like that. And so because of that orientation, those 10 people have to show you that they worked on your project for that number of hours every month. Now, the reality of it is nobody truly tracks their time accurately. And so they're all going to say like, oh yeah, I spent 10 hours on that. They spent 2 hours on that. You know what I'm saying? And so it also keeps the whole process honest, because we're like, all right, that deliverable costs X amount of dollars, no matter what. If it takes us 20 hours to do it, if it takes us 2 hours to do it, it doesn't matter. You're still going to get that outcome that you looked for. And we're all clear on what that is. So I think it just makes it a much better relationship between you and the client, because you're not just like trying to prove to them that you did work every month. You're instead saying like, okay, we did all this analysis. These are the next steps that we need to execute on. And we're also going to help you make those things happen. And then we have a fixed cost associated with that.
The other thing, and I've talked to SEO agencies. I think I've hired one for myself. But I think from the client's perspective, one of the most frustrating things about SEO is, or at least the SEO agencies that I've talked to, is they say, okay, like these are the keywords, And it's just kind of like a hope and wait type of thing. It's like, you're just going to keep paying me, and and eventually this stuff is going to happen, and we're just going to we don't know which keywords we're going to rank for, but out of these 100, eventually we're going to get, 10 of them, and you just keep paying until we get the number of keywords that we want, and we're driving traffic. That is incredibly frustrating for a business owner. Because like, people always want results. They care about the results. That's the main thing that they're buying. Mm-hmm. And so when there's so much ambiguity as to when we're going to get those results, mm-hmm. it just doesn't work well for anybody but the agency.
Sure.
And so that's why a lot of those SEO agencies struggle. So that I absolutely love the way that you guys operate.
And another thing that we do is that we will structure our engagements where, like, within the first 2 to 4 weeks, you're going to get quick wins from us. And so those are things that we can work with you to execute right away while we're doing all this other work. So there's less of that ambiguity. We can be like, all right, let's implement these 5 things and let's measure against those so you can see what our impact is. And you're not waiting like 9 months to determine what happened. There's a common trope, I guess, in SEO where people say, oh, SEO is always going to take a minimum of 6 months.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Google doesn't take 6 months to react to you. It generally takes 6 months for a brand to do something. Now, if we're oriented around these quick wins and the client is on board with that, we can see results much faster than that, probably 2 months. So we just make it really clear and upfront, like, here's how we're going to do this. Here's what you can expect. And here's what we're aiming for. I'm not going to promise anyone any sort of result, but our track record indicates that we get a lot of results very quickly.
That's awesome, man. Well, guess what? We're out of time. It went by so fast.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Mike?
Yeah, iPullRank.com, at iPullRank on most of the social channels, or Mike at iPullRank.com.
Awesome. And who would be the perfect person to reach out to you today?
Perfect person to reach out to me today is a VP of marketing. The type of company doesn't matter so much. Obviously, there's an ideal customer profile, but I like to just help people, right? So if you just got a problem, something you can't solve, or you just want to bounce some ideas, I'm open to that. Maybe down the line we end up working together, but I don't think it's, I don't need to hard close anybody today.
Yeah, perfect, man. All right, final question. What was your rapper name?
Mike King.
I was just Mike King. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. To all of our listeners, thank you guys for tuning in today, and make sure that you return next Thursday and every Thursday for the next episode of Operation Agency Freedom. Bye,
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thanks.